Hello, everybody, and welcome to the weird world of knowing. I am Rachel Earing, your host, and today we are going to be talking to Margreet, who has spent the majority of her life in universities, helping children who have been perhaps diagnosed as finding it difficult to learn, probably being and feeling a little bit weird themselves. So it's really wonderful that Marguerite has joined us because I met again Marguerite at the Wyrd conference in Broughton in Skipton last year. And Margreet Poulie is from the Netherlands, and she is the most beautiful soul. And I'm delighted that to have her here because she's got this wealth of knowledge that she's going to share with us, not just about the children, but also about how her own life has sort of progressed in these weird connections that happen that put you on this path of her and I actually meeting at the conference and us being here today with the podcast. So without further ado, Marguerite, how are you?
I'm fine. And it's a little bit difficult to come inside because the weather outside is so beautiful with
Oh,
blooming.
yeah, and for once, it's actually beautiful here in the UK too. And I've just come inside, and I'm actually feeling quite warm, which is absolutely wonderful. So, Marguerite, let us find out a little bit more about you before we sort of move forward. Tell us about your life helping the children in the Netherlands and what that actually meant for them and for you.
Yeah, the department where I worked was specialized in mind the word disabled children, but disabled learning. Especially, my task was to study the motivation to learn. In my life myself, I happened to find out that I had a dyslexia,
Mm,
and in my time that word didn't exist. But my parents always said there's nobody that does more her best than you. And I felt myself how what figures I got. My parents were always rewarding me for finding out how this learning process, yeah, what it was about. It wasn't about me, but it was something. And so it wasn't amazing that I ended up in a situation where children were brought to us by the schools with the question, what's miss with these children?
mm,
And I knew from my heart there's nothing miss with them. So I was in a situation where with a one-way screen, the students were working with the children. I was observing, and we talked through how we could find the natural wish, the longing to learn. Each child wants to learn.
absolutely. You just
Yeah. And then
from that.
when we could reach the children, then we went to the schools and the parents to teach them that was nothing wrong with their child, but that the system couldn't listen to them and couldn't tap their natural way of learning. And so the teachers became very interested. And then I found out that the teachers tried to control the children instead of learn with them together. And the teachers who could hear that, they enjoyed it. And yeah, they became really motivated to approach their work from another angle. So that was very rewarding work towards.
Music to most parents' ears as well, because we all know with our own children that, we all have sticky points, don't we? We're all motivated to learn in our own particular way. I know that I have to experience something for it to actually really sink in with me, actually just reading the words, unless it's put into a story form that will keep my interest. Actually, just facts don't do much for me. I
Yeah,
struggle with facts because they're boring, frankly.
yeah,
And unless that subject matter is so interesting that I need to know those facts, I am really not interested. So I can relate to that because how on earth do you make those facts interesting?
and you approach it from the importance of the experiential learning.
Yeah.
And there's another thing I came across is that conscious or unconscious, but that children and yeah, most adults have learned when something is not nice or it's difficult or then you have to avoid failing or you fail when you can do it instead of thinking that when something approaches you that you do not immediately go to the solution to to get away from the pain or the inconvenience, but look at it and say, how can I approach this? And one of the nice stories,
Curiosity, isn't it? Yeah.
and also the one surprise in my own life is that my father taught me to sail a sailing boat without rudder.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that is completely accepting the forces outside you, but still keep in mind where you want to be. And that's also a big thing I discovered in approaching learning is that you help to awaken the curiosity when something is inconvenient. And not only for children, but now my work, what I do now is mostly that for adults.
Absolutely. I so relate to everything that you said there. And I'm sure so many listeners and viewers are going to relate to this because, especially if we have children who may be on the spectrum, we have so many titles for things now, don't we? And it helps us to adjust how we approach that learning curve of either our own children or ourselves or somebody else. Because if we give it a title, then we know what to do with it. But I'm of the view, you may be too, I'm just going to test this out, but I'm of the view that basically, if we can do this from a kind, compassionate place of emotional intelligence, then we are automatically on the same plane of each other because we're actually understanding when somebody is fearful of moving forward with that particular subject. Now, what that subject is doesn't actually matter. It's how it is approached and how that fear is approached as to then how you move forward. Now, that could be something to do with your mental health, that could be to do with a physical task, it could be to do with educational learning, sort of, mathematics or anything else. And I think once we get over that emotional charge, in a way, of, woof, this has really fired me up inside in either a pleasant or unpleasant way, or maybe there's just nothing, total disinterest.
Yeah,
Once we understand those aspects, we can really get and dig into the deeper core matter of each area that we're moving forward. Does that
yeah,
make sense to you?
yeah, absolutely. Wonderful said. And it's not so that you have to be willing to inhale every hurt, but what is very important when you have a longing and you want something to be somewhere, and then you approach hurt or you want to connect with someone and that person doesn't want you, then you can easily say, I don't want you, and skip your longing and say you are not good for me.
Hmm.
But then to to come to the consciousness that your longing is more important and to find then why is this person in my life and accept the hurt and accept the longing that you can do something different to make that connection. But if you don't want to, yeah, it's I find that very interesting to make contact with the deeper longing. I do not want to connect with everybody,
Mm.
but often I want to connect, and when it doesn't work the way I want it to be, then it's very important to find out what's my share
Yeah. Yeah.
in this,
Yeah.
and then be willing to go inside and find out that it's not helpful to point your finger, you were wrong, always three pointing to yourself. And
So glad you use that. I use that too. You know, we use these fingers a lot to actually point outwards, don't we? But actually, when we bring it back and we start, even if it's just tapping on ourselves, that releases things in its own right altogether. So, Marguerite, tell us a little bit more about. I do want to go further into this aspect, but before we do, I just want to find out a little bit more about you because the way that your parents brought you up has really led to a very open aspect of your mind has been opened up to very different ways of being able to move forward. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing. You've told us about the sailing, but what was it like growing up with your parents?
yeah, um, it's um, the growing up was not so conscious, but when I look back, I can see how much I um, um, how thankful I can be for the way I'm raised. And it's yeah, when you are in the water, um, as a fish, you don't know
Yeah.
that the water. But afterwards, I can see that there were some very basic things. I remember that we once talked about the habit my father had to before I went to sleep.
Mm.
I must stand in my bed, and he asked me to trust him and to let myself fall down. And in the beginning, it was a little bit, and then each time further, 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 and until I really could trust him so much that I could really let fell myself down like a tree, and he would catch me. And um, it's a play,
Mm.
but afterwards, um, it has become such a deep feeling of trust that there's always something in the universe that will catch me.
Mm.
And so that's an example of my upbringing where I afterwards can say, well, what a gift.
Mm.
And what I mentioned already that yeah, that they saw me as a person and not as a child that had to come home with good figures.
Yeah, yeah, and just do as you're told. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I know that you told me another beautiful story about how because I think the way that we are educated and the way that we then go on to educate ourselves moving forward, it really does play out then in our personal lives, doesn't it? And the rewards that we gain, whether that be from personal relationships, whether that be financially, whether that be our health. So when you decided to, because you left the university, didn't you? When you left, why did you leave the university when you were dealing and helping with all of these children um, to do what?
Oh, yeah. Um, I was for 20 years working in university in the job I just mentioned, but I couldn't feel at home. Um, uh, I was highly rewarded in my teaching job for students. Students loved me, but my colleagues constantly said I'm not scientific, and it there was something in that world that uh, I I could maintain. Is that a good word? I could maintain myself there, and I earned my money, but I was not happy. And then the professor where I worked, um, he was dying, and somehow I discovered, but I saw as the first I dared to mention that he was not functioning well, and I started to talk with him, and then he said to me, Margreet, I will fly out of life. You must fly out of university. You do not belong here. You've so much to offer, but um, the scientific world as it is here cannot see what your qualities are. So he encouraged me. And then I was married with a man who said, I earn enough, just quit your job and start your own company and start to do where you're good at. And yeah, that was within a year, I had my own school. And
So how do you help children? Is it children or adults you help now? How do you help?
yeah, I switched from children to adults. And I met a professor in the city where I live in Nijmegen. And he was developing a new theory and method, and that was the self knowledge method. Self confrontation method is another word. And that's a theory where you um, assume that people in their story they know what their future is, they know what their longing is, and what's missing is the forms to give a form to their longing.
Hmm.
This message without, and that was what I liked so much, without the opinion and the diagnose of the coach or the helper or how you call the person, the therapist, um, you help them to give shape, to make clear what their longing was, and to help them to find a form for their longing
Hmm.
and to discover their limiting beliefs and cleaning up their story and retell their own story. So I really fell in love with, not with the professor, but with the theory. I love the man. I'm still working with him.
Oh.
And so I wrote my dissertation still with children
Hmm.
on this method. And I did that already during my job. But when I started my own company and my own school in this method. And I did that for another 20 years. and the last year, and then we come also with the field. My colleague Miriam, first student, but now a highly um, appreciated colleague.
Hmm.
Um, she came to me and she said, Margreet, we do so wonderful work, and there is a digital time coming. Let's see what we can make digital. And we said, well, the work we do is relational, isn't possible to do it digital. But then we found out that it was possible.
Hmm.
And that was also a gift from the field. I just got an idea with this little lamp. I don't know if you get that symbol. And it was given to me that all the experiences we had of the, yeah, all the years we used this method, that we could make a database of human experience that could help people to deepen their experiences. And
So let me stop you there a moment and let's just dive into that. So this is the weird world of knowing, and you have this weird download. So explain what the field is and explain what this knowing is for you, if that's okay for the listeners.
yeah, I would try. And
I know I asked the impossible because I asked what it
no,
thinks.
no, no. I like I'd like to see what will be said through me, because this is a wonderful question. I do not know the answer, so let's see. Um, what is happening? We ask people for an experience that really touches them. So we know it's an important happening.
Mm.
And then we ask them to write down and to score their experience on a list of feelings. And this list of feelings has been for 50 years the same.
Hmm.
So we have a field, a literally field of human experiences that all recorded important experiences on the same feeling list.
Mm-hmm.
And now what you get, you write down your experience, you um, feeling your deep feelings, and most of the time you can say now, how do you feel? Then you come up with 2, 3, maybe 4 feelings, but that's it.
Yeah.
But this is a list of 24 feelings. I also did research on which feelings that part. And then you ask the field out of 5,000 other people, who does feel the same thing as I feel now? And then you get, and I experienced since the Wyrd conference,
Mm.
I experienced that as a holy moment
Mm.
where these experiences, maybe they're 30 years ago, but time is not there. So another person, woman or man, you can choose, comes with their feeling, give it to you and say, oh, I feel the same as you. And what we do then is ask the person who does the self-investigation, what is common? What is what's the common underneath your both experiences?
Mm.
And what happens then, Rachel? It's amazing. Then you start to talk about a deeper level, and we call it a ladle, and some it's unconscious level of your own experience.
Mm.
So you go to a level that's normally not visible, has no words, but the field of all these experiences is helping you to, um, yeah, to bring these words. And the interesting thing is that here is a overlap of the real science, the hard uh, science of correlations, but also the yeah, the very intuitive interpretation of these experiences. And that's not hard. That's just what is in the meeting of these two people, one real and one virtual.
And how does that make people feel? How do they explain that experience when they've had it?
They sometimes they say, how does this computer know this? But often we get the expression, I'm not alone. They feel recognized, they feel encouraged to go deeper in their experience. They're amazed that when they can trust, oh, this touches me in a negative or a positive way, I can take this seriously. There's something, my first impression, this is good or this not good, is there to teach me something. So our tool um, really makes it possible to that important lesson to find the door to curiosity to help that open. And we are,
It does come back, doesn't it, to what you were saying at the very beginning about the children, about finding that meaningful learning for them as to where is that door of curiosity for them, and if it is disagreeable, then can they be curious enough to actually find out why and just say, no, I just don't like it. I'm really not interested. I want to move on
yeah,
to something else. And then it's helping anybody of whatever age actually go down to that next dimension of depth
yeah,
and
wonderful
depth
said. Yeah,
and then more depth, because um we can skim the surface, and I think that's what a lot of us have been doing for so long. We've been skimming on this wave of just whatever it is been for most people. And mostly it's been fantastic because
Yeah,
we've not had we've not had World War in our time. We've not suffered,
absolutely.
in the West here in the UK. Obviously, that has been happening around the world, and especially as we're going now into the Ukraine and Russia situation, that skimming on the surface doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and sometimes you need it because you cannot go always deep.
Yeah,
But there are moments that life ask you to go deep
yeah,
and not to judge and not to push away what's inconvenient. And uh, yeah, uh, the I don't know how I would react being in a war. I think I would freeze and I would go on the automatic pilot, and then when I was safe, I would allow to feel again.
yeah.
But um,
And yet, I do think there are many people now who are rising up above that, and they are, maybe it's not on the surface, but they're sort of skimming under at a certain level to help in their unique way. And I think that compassion of connection of because the world is so much smaller now, we can see it, it's there every day on our screens, on the news, on the radio, wherever it is, we have a connection there with people and we want to be able to help.
yeah, and you said to be able to help. I must say, Miriam and I, um, when we ask ourselves, where is this tool of use? And then we think at the moment, um, for people who want to be professional helpers,
Yeah.
to keep their own story out. So in their judgments, in their pushing away people, so that to clean themselves, to be able um, to be a container for others, and therefore you have to make connection. How difficult it is. So
You know what I'm just saying now? I have this vision in front of me of um the when we grow vegetables, but we're growing them in the like the air plants, and we're growing them without soil. So I've just seen in my mind's eye that funnel. It's like a funnel that we're putting in our seedlings for cabbage and herbs and parsnips and carrots or whatever, and we're putting them in this very clean funnel. And actually, what's growing there is really highly nutrient vegetables and
mm,
minerals. And for some reason, that has just really come to mind as actually that's what we need to be as individuals. We need to be that clear funnel to be able to grow the new regenerated vegetables, minerals, herbs for society. And if we are not clean, like you say, if we're still carrying all that old stuff that might be grubby with lots of past information, then um, we're passing that forward, aren't we? We're just carrying that forward into the next place. That's not to say that my vision means we need to get rid of the soil else by any means. Please don't think that, listeners. Sometimes when you get these visions that come to you, it's just basically showing you another way of thinking, of being able to explain something and
yeah, yeah. I
mind.
connected with your what you said about yourself, that you need these images and practical way of expressing yourself.
Yeah,
So I like the it's always dangerous to use parallels. What came up with me when you said it, I liked it. Yeah, yeah, the funnel. And I think when you are clean, you also dare to be very honest.
yeah,
Um, we are so to share with someone who I suddenly was think of someone I I talked to, and she told. so slowly
Mm.
that it was hardly doable to stay in contact with her. And then there was a moment that I shared with her that it was too difficult for me to listen to her.
Mm.
And she started to cry. And and she said, "This is the moment I deeply trust you because you dare to share this." And then we could find out what made her to talk so slowly. And it was she had developed that habit to control and to see every reaction people had um to be alert, to be so it was um a protecting herself, while the result was that nobody connected really with her.
Yeah.
They faked. And when I said, "I can't listen to you," then she felt connection.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of um, also of cleanness,
Mm.
uh,
Absolutely.
that you dare to be honest and share.
Daring to be really truthful without,
Yeah, that's a better word.
fear, without that fear of hurting somebody's feelings. These are just, when I say I don't just like something with facts, actually, that's a fact that actually resonates because it has depth behind it that I can understand.
Mm,
So that is a fact, going back to the beginning of the interview, that I know will stick with me because you've explained that fact and that story in a way that resonates with me.
great.
Now, I'm hoping that the listeners are now beginning to see how these conversations and the way that we take science, learning, education, and we can turn them into stories such as these actually really do help people shift forward with our own ability to remember, to
Mm,
make sense of, because it is those rememberings that awaken us to, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. I know why I feel like that. And I know why I don't trust such a lot of people from that, because it's surface skimming, isn't it? And actually you've just given me some real depth I can cling on to and go,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And that's an example of the surface that people were always polite and to let her talk. But as soon as she was away, turn the back on her and say, "Oh, I don't want to see that person anymore."
absolutely.
That was painful. Well, yeah. Mm.
Oh gosh, well, I have absolutely adored this conversation, and we're just getting to all the juicy bits now. But however, we'll just have to meet again, Marguerite, and do this again. It's just been wonderful. So, very quickly, before let us move on to the two questions that I always ask. If you were going to give someone some advice who were just starting perhaps a new career, new job, or just leaving university, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give them?
Oh, good question. There's something I do not dare to say.
Go on.
Use our tool, my inside out.
Absolutely. And I knew you were going to say that because why wouldn't you? Literally,
It makes me shy. Yeah, yeah,
you've spent your whole life
it's true. It's true. And
turning this into what it is now. So
yeah, I
absolutely,
think that we made something, and I feel even my eyes becoming a little bit wet. It feels as um the top on the cake of my life, and I really can view back on a life where I think I was useful and I leave something behind that's very valuable. And but was also a little bit a joke. Let me see what advice. I think that the advice is take your own feeling so seriously, and that is difficult. So you can go to a coach and a therapist, but our tool makes it just 24/7 available at home, and you really get answers. So that would be the advice. Learn to listen to your own feelings and take them very, very seriously.
I think that's just the best advice I've heard so far. So thank you for that, because we don't, and we're taught not to.
It's
It's
difficult. Yeah.
the one part of our journey that we really, really should. You are that important that you need to take your feelings deeply seriously and find those hidden depths to it. I love that. Thank you very much. Next question. Last one. Who would you like to hear be interviewed on the Weird World of Knowing?
Um, Lots of people. I've found uh, Putin very, very interesting, but maybe you have interviewed her already.
I've not. No,
Oh,
I didn't. I only connected very briefly with Uta, so that would be really interesting.
so interesting.
For anyone who's listening, this is another lady who was on the Weird Experience that Margreet and I met on. So if you're listening, Uta, then please do get in touch.
Yeah, Ute is approaching the field by art,
Good.
and she's a wonderful, wonderful person. Yeah.
For those listeners who are wondering when we're talking about the field, if you think about the film The Matrix, if you've not seen The Matrix, then I suggest you have a little watch of that, because it really does give a very good example of the different dimensions that we are talking about, this having the depth. So if you think of a piece of paper, a flat piece of paper, that's um, basically one dimensional. When you start to put sides on it, it becomes two dimensional. When you turn it into a box, it becomes three dimensional. So when we start to add more depth to these areas in our life, we go into different dimensions, and the deeper that we can become and we start to think out of these boxes, then it opens up new paradigms within it. Which brings us to the field of exploration and curiosity and consciousness. And that's really what this is all about. Today, we've had a really beautiful discussion about consciousness and how Marguerite is approaching it and has approached it through university life, through teaching there, and now being able to bring her own version of this out into the world. So if you do want to get in touch with Marguerite, then please do. The details are going to be in below. But Marguerite, how can they get in touch with you?
How
How can people get in touch with
Margreet and then at and then my inside out, and inside is with uh GH.
okay,
Inside.
inside? I will put all of those details into the podcast so that you can just click on a button and connect with her. Marguerite, it has been an absolute joy. Thank you so much. Love you immensely. And we will speak very soon.
Thank you for your wonderful questions, and I will listen with curiosity to myself.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Please do share, subscribe, and give us any comments on what you've listened to today. We'd love to hear from you. Take care, everybody. We'll see you soon on the Weird World of Knowing. Thank you so much for listening on the Weird World of Knowing. I do hope you enjoyed your time with us. I'm Rachel Earing, your host. And gosh, I'm having a ball putting all of this together for you, so I hope you are too. And if you are, please do like, subscribe, and share with those who might actually benefit from these weird moments of knowing as they realise how many of their own they've been having all their life. Take care, and we'll see you next week.